Good morning. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm planning a church down in Windsor, and for the last 2 years, your pastor, John Richardson, he has been such an encouragement to me. Like 5 years ago, if you'd asked me what I've been doing, I wouldn't have told you this is what I've been doing. But he's been just a voice of wisdom and encouragement to me over the last couple of years, and so it's a huge privilege for me to get to stand and open God's Word where he normally stands this morning. As Randy mentioned it a minute ago, be praying for him. And he needs your prayers and your encouragement as well. So for the last 12 or 13 years, I've been working in youth ministry. There comes a point where your hair starts to fall out and they tell you, hey, you're too old, you need to go do something else with your life. And so that's when you start thinking about it, and that's what ultimately led me to church planting. It's actually not true. But a couple of years ago, while I was still in youth ministry, we were at a camp at the beach. Okay, so I used to live in North Carolina, not far from the beach. And when you're at a camp at the beach and you're staying at the hotel or the condo or whatever, and you park, sometimes you end up parking in a sand parking lot. And that's a little bit of a gamble. And here's what I mean by that if you don't know. Okay, sometimes you park in the sand, just underneath that little layer of sand, some really hard dirt, or maybe some concrete or something. You can just pull on in and pull on out when you need to. Sometimes when you park in the sand, okay, especially when you're driving like a half-ton 15 passenger van like I was on this particular day. By the way, that accent, that's from Georgia. Hopefully you understand most of what I say this morning, but back to the point. Okay, driving a 15 passenger van, sometimes you pull into some soft sand. Maybe it's 2 or 3 feet of that soft sand. You get into that stuff and what happens? Come on, help me out now. Yeah, you get stuck. You get stuck. But I learned something on this particular day. I learned something that I didn't know before. And that is, not only can you get stuck in sand with a 15 passenger van, there's actually a worse level that you can go to, and that is what I'll call, you can be stubborn in sand with a 15 passenger van. What that looks like is that moment when you realize I should call the tow truck, you don't. Rather, you strap your hands to the wheel and you decide to push on the gas, hoping at some point you're going to hit something hard and jump on out of there. Is that what happened to me? Absolutely not. That van dug a foot or two into the sand even deeper. So I went from being stuck in sand to what I'll call being stubborn or stubborn stuck in sand. And this morning, I'll talk about, at least for the first part of our time together, I'll talk about something that's kind of serious. It can seem like a downer if you're not listening, you don't hold on to the end, some good news is coming. You know, we can be stuck in sin too. Anybody here ever been stuck in sin? Well, let's just all raise our hands. We've all been okay. Let's just be honest. Let's get real this morning. What's that feel like? What's that feel like when you're stuck in sin, or when you've got a friend or a family member or a neighbor that you're looking on at their life and you can see, man, they're just addicted. They're struggling. They're stuck in their sin. What does that feel like? I'm a youth pastor. You're allowed to reply. I'm not one of those real pastors yet. So when I ask you a question, you can answer if you want. What's that feel like? When you're stuck in sin, or when somebody else is stuck in sin. Awful. It's sad. It feels awful. It feels sad. It can feel hopeless. It can feel frustrating, right? Right? It's true. Well, just like that man, not only can we be stuck in sin, but we can actually also be very stubborn in sin too, can't we? Anybody know what that's like? Yeah. I'll be the first one to raise my hand. And so I don't really want to get out. I want to strap my hands to the wheel and I want to punch the gas. I want to keep doing what I'm doing because it feels right for the moment. Right? We can be stubborn in our sin. Our passage this morning, the Apostle Paul talks about what it's like, what happens to us when we are stubborn in our sin. I'm in Ephesians chapter 4 this morning. I'm in Ephesians chapter 4. If you have a Bible, I'd love for you to open to that. If not, it'll be on the screen in just a second. The Apostle Paul, Ephesians 4, beginning in verse 17, tells us this about being stubborn in our sin. Now I say, and I testify in the Lord, that you, pause. Is he talking to somebody else? Is he talking to people outside the church? Is he talking about those other people out there that are stubborn in their sin? No, he's right to Christians. He's talking to me. He's talking to us. He's talking to every human being who's ever lived. He says, you must no longer, pause. If he can say no longer something, what's that mean? At one point we did do something. He says, you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do in the futility of their minds. So if he can say, no longer, you Christians don't do this anymore, then the truth is, at one point in time, all of us have been stubborn in our sin. All of us have been stuck in our sin. That's true of every single one of us. The playing field is leveled for every one of us with regards to this idea of sin. Let me pause for a second and not assume anything. I shouldn't assume that you even understand what I mean when I say the word sin. I don't want to insult your intelligence, but let's sort of shed a little light on that word too. Because the way that I was raised, not how you were raised, I was raised in the South. I'm from there, so I can pick on there, right? Okay. I was raised hearing something like this. Okay, sin is, God's got a list out there of things you shouldn't do and things you should do. You don't do the things He said you should do, and you do the things He said you shouldn't do, and that's sin. And then to some degree, that's true. But that's not the heart of sin, by the way. Make sure that's really clear. It's really important for the rest of what we're going to cover this morning. That's not the heart of sin. The heart of sin is the idea that there is a God out there that is perfect in all of His ways. He is good. He is holy. He is righteous. He's never done anything that is unloving. It is at the very core of His being that He is love. And so, what sin is, according to the Bible, it's not a list of do's and don'ts in and of itself. Don't do that stuff. No. It's anything that is different than or contrary to or against this character of God. So let me give you just one example. The book of Numbers tells us that God cannot lie. So do we, as Christians, we hear that, don't lie. We do that because it's the sixth commandment. You go, thou shalt not lie. Well, sure, yeah, that's true. But that's just the command. What's the heart there? Why don't we lie? Because God can't lie. God is not a liar. He's never lied one time. In all of eternity, He never will. And that's why it's wrong to lie. At the very heart of it, this is connected to the character of God. That's what sin is. So, sorry, I put a big pause there on our reading of the Scripture, but I hope that helps you as we continue to read here. Verse 18. Not only are they futile in their minds, he says, verse 18, they are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of ignorance that is in them due to the hardness of their hearts. They have become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and give you a heads up. There's a part of me that doesn't really, I don't enjoy talking about sin. Okay? It's negative. I like to be a positive person. But it's reality, right? So it's important that we talk about things that are true and that are real. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just hang on with me. Hang on with me for about 10 minutes. We're going to talk about this negative thing called sin. That's reality. Listen, that we have to talk about it, whether we like it or not, whether it feels good or not. We have to talk about it. But I just want to promise you something. There's good news coming on the back end. All right, it's coming. So let's go down here for just a minute. And let's see what Paul says, and then we're going to come out on the other side. And I hope there's a lot of joy for you on the other side. See, there's a temptation when we commit, singular acts of sin in our life. There's a temptation to think that, this is not really all that damaging. It's not really all that big of a deal. I mean, I know God's upset with me, and so I've got to apologize to Him, and He forgives me, and we're all good. But it doesn't really have any long-term effects on my life. Unless I'm doing something, really serious out there, it doesn't really affect my life. And Paul says that couldn't be farther from the truth. He says sin absolutely affects our life. And what does sin do us? The first thing he says is, by the way, you got some notes here. I'm a doodler. So if you like to doodle, you got some notes to do that. If you're not, you throw it away, it doesn't matter. That's just for you. First thing Paul says here, sin causes our thoughts to become futile. Now, who used that word this week in your conversation at work, your home? Futile. Not me. So let's go ahead and figure out, what does that mean? Help me out. What does the word futile mean? You don't know? Okay, that's good. Yeah, we're learning something. What's futile mean? Anybody know? Help me out. No, not that. It's worthless or pointless or purposeless or trivial. Paul says that when we're stubborn in our sin, our mind, the thoughts that are in our mind become trivial. They become purposeless. They become pointless. They become futile. Can you think of an example, maybe in your life? We don't want to show that part. somebody else's life, who's over there, who's stubborn in their sin. Can you think of an example of where someone's thoughts becomes futile because they're being stubborn in their sin? Purposeless, worthless?
Worthless.
20-hour binge of a TV show on Netflix? Nothing inherently wrong with Netflix, right? There's not even anything inherently wrong with binging a show on Netflix, I don't think. But if that becomes a pattern in your life, you have to stop and ask yourself a question. Why? Why am I doing this? Why do I feel the need to fill my heart with somebody else's story on a TV show or in a movie? Like, why is it that I can't find a way to laugh unless I'm watching that show? There's something going on in here, right? If I need to run to Netflix to decompress and to calm down and disconnect, but there's something broken there, right? Our tendency when we're stubborn in our sin is to have our thoughts become a waste of the mind that God's given us, to become purposeless, to become trivial. It doesn't stop there, though. Number 2, Paul says, sin causes us to become darkened in our understanding. What does that mean? Help me out. Come on now. We're getting close to the lunch hour, at least my lunch hour. So I got to keep you guys coming. I got to keep you guys talking. Stick with me now. What does it mean to be darkened in your understanding? What do you think he means? Yeah, to forget about God. I think about it like a blind person or a person who's put blinders on. What does it mean to be darkened in our sight? I mean, we can't see reality. We can't see what the truth. We can't see what's going on here. Paul's telling us when we're stubborn in our sin, we stop seeing what's true. We stop seeing reality. Truths that should be totally logical and reasonable to us all of a sudden become intolerable to us. Let me just give you one example of this. It's so prevalent, sort of in your face right now. Listen to the world that I live in. As I'm circling through Facebook and I'm having conversations with people out in the world. For thousands of years, virtually every single person who's ever lived on the face of the planet at least believed in something we might call a God. Virtually every single person who's ever lived in the history of the world has just accepted as an assumption, accepted as a fact, there's a God. And yet, I would say, in agreement with Paul here, due to the pervasiveness and the growth of sin in our world, this is all of a sudden multiplying to becoming something, an idea that is intolerable. It's not just rejected, it is intolerable. I can't believe you Christians, you ignorant Christians, right? They look at us and they say, I can't believe you would think that. I can't believe you would think there's something beyond the material world. And if you're here this morning, I mean no offense to you, where you are, but I do, again, I want to be honest enough to tell you the truth of what God's Word said. Take it or leave it, right? Be honest enough to tell you that when you start rejecting things that billions of people have assumed to be true for thousands of years, like you just sort of cast that away. I'm the guy who's not figured things out. You just take a second and ask yourself, maybe I'm the one who's wrong. Maybe it's the billions of people who might actually be right. I'm not saying all those people believe in Jesus. That's another conversation. But they've at least believed that there's something beyond this material world. The Bible says that when we begin to be stubborn in our sin, the blinders come on, become darkened to the truth. Number 3, Paul says, sin causes us to become ignorant. And that should just be obvious, right? If we're darkened to the truth, then we can't see reality. We can't see what the truth is. Right? I've said a lot of words in the last 8 minutes. Let me see if I can summarize it really, really clearly for you. There's a guy, one of my favorite authors on this subject. He summarizes it, I think, the best of anybody that I've ever read. You should really lean in and listen to this summary of what I think Paul's saying here. This guy named James Spiegel says it this way: immorality or sin hampers our ability to reason correctly, especially with regard to moral and spiritual things. The more a person sins, the more his mind or her mind is corrupted. I think that's a really great summary of what Paul's trying to say here. Listen, it is not harmless when we are stubborn in our sin. It is dangerous. Sin is a poison that keeps us from thinking rightly and thinking clearly. It's really dangerous. Paul even goes on in the very next verse, the very last verse that we've read so far, verse 19, to say that you can get to the point in your life where you become callous. Now, stop, everybody take a deep breath. Come on, take a deep breath. What's a callus? Yeah, any farmers? I was in the last service and I was like, any farmers in the room? And they're like, dude, all of us are farmers. Any weightlifters in the room? They like to bench press? Okay, where's the callus show up on you when you're bench pressing? For me, around here, not that I'm doing a whole lot of bench pressing, as you can tell, but get a little bit of callus there. You remember running around barefoot when you were a kid? Try doing that now. You developed a callus. Some of us who played out in the summers, I know in Georgia, we never had our shoes on during the summers. And you develop these calluses on your feet. Or when I'm playing guitar, develop calluses on my finger. What is a callus? It's a layer or layers of dead skin between my living skin that feels things, that hurts, has nerves. Layer of dead skin between my living skin and the world. To protect my living skin when it can feel pain, right? Can protect it from being poked or prodded or cut, right? It's pretty cool. I mean, we've got a really cool, good God that He designed our body in such a way. It's like, man, if I'm going to grab onto that plow every day and I'm going to get out there and I'm going to work hard, God says, I'm going to get your body to adapt to that. You're going to develop these calluses to protect you so you're not hurting all the time. It's pretty cool, right? But Paul tells us in this passage there isn't just physical callus, which is a good thing, by the way, in many cases. Paul says there's actually something something called a spiritual callus. And listen, it's not layers of dead skin between your living skin and the world. It is layers of a hardened heart between your living soul and God. And listen, some of you came to this place this morning with a callus on your heart. Listen, you feel it. You feel it this morning. Like, man, when I try to talk to God, it was like words are hitting the ceiling. It's like He's not even there. Or you know the way He's asked you to live a certain way according to His character, and you're like, I don't want anything to do with that. And you said no, and you said no, and your stubbornness, you said no, and you said no, and you said no, and it's developed a callus over your soul. So the question we have to ask this morning is there any hope for that person? I've been talking for 12 minutes. Let's just be honest, all negative stuff. But Andy, please don't end in prayer right now. We don't want to go home right now because that's depressing. You've been talking about sin for 12 minutes. Please, can we move on? Is there any hope for us? Is there any hope for me, Andy, in this situation of having, being stubborn in my sin? Well, thank goodness, actually, yes, there is. And it's in the very next verses of Ephesians chapter 4. Paul says, he goes on to say, we can go ahead and skip that one, man. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 20. But that is not the way you learn Christ. That's not the way. There's good news. There's something positive on the other side. There's something that's happened to you that's changed your situation where you're not like this. You're not ignorant in your thinking all the time. We are sometimes. But there's been this fundamental change in who you are as a person that's dropped the blinders from your eyes. Right? Where you can actually see the truth. Verse 21, assuming that you have heard about the truth, and we're taught in Him as the truth is in Jesus, to put off the old self, which belongs to the former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of Jesus in true holiness and in righteousness. You see, just like in those first verses that were really depressing, if we're honest, sin affected our minds and our hearts. In the second half of the verse, the good news is that through the gospel of Jesus Christ, we can be transformed in our hearts and our minds. And so, what's the crux? What's the center point of the conversation we're having this morning? It's the slide. Let's go back to it, if you will. That is that the Christian life, the very heart and the soul, the battlefield for the Christian life, is the heart and the mind. It is not lists of things to do. It is not go to church, pray, read your Bible, give to the poor. Right? It's not do all these religious activities. It's not even don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't hang out with people who do. That's not the heart of it. That's the fruit that pops out of the heart of it. And the heart of it is what's going on in your heart and in your mind. Let me pause for a second. I need to be nerdy for just a second. What's the greatest commandment in the Bible? You guys remember? Some of you know. To love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with what? No. Tricked you. When that command was given in Deuteronomy chapter 6, the word mind was not there. It says the heart, the soul, and the might, and strength. Jesus, in all three Gospels, all through Matthew, Mark, and Luke, where he gave the greatest commandment, he adds the word mind. Why? Well, because in our world and in the world, the Greek world that he was writing into, there were separate things. In the Hebrew world, they were not. The heart and the mind were the same thing. It's the seat of the person. The very seat of the will. It's the center of your personality. It's who you are. The heart and the mind together. So that's why I put them both up there. To help you understand, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter, heart, mind. The very center of your being, the battlefield for your life, the battlefield for the quality of your life, the battlefield for the future of your life, is what's going on up here. And if you stubbornly set your mind on sin, there will be a certain outcome. But if you turn to Christ, not that that's going to happen one time and forever be that way. You're going to keep getting stuck in sin, right? We already raised our hands. You're going to keep being stubborn in sin. We've already raised our hands. But we keep going back to Jesus too. And that's the first application point that we see here this morning. Number one, set your mind on the truth that is in Jesus, in the gospel. Guys, I've never preached 4 services in a row. This is brand new for me. It's exhausting for one. But it's also exciting in the sense that in all 4 services, this is the moment that I get most excited about in this message to you. Because how has God chosen, in His infinite wisdom, how has God chosen to change you, to transform me, to change our hearts, to change our minds? Did He say, here's how I'll do it, I'll just give them a big list of things to do? No, absolutely not. The God of the universe, look at me, He looked down from heaven at you and me and our stubbornness in sin. And He says, it is not sufficient for me to send somebody else to deal with that problem. He says, I'm going to come down there myself. I'm going to live a life where I am never stubborn to the will of the Father, not one single time. I will never sin. Look, not for me, because I need to prove something. For you. Because you can't. But just go ahead and own it. You can't live a life 100% void of stubbornness to sin. You can't. Just own it. Go ahead and own it. You can't. So Jesus did it for you. And then He marched to a cross. The book of Colossians tells us He took every single act, every single thought of stubbornness in your entire life from the day you were born to the day that you died, and He nailed it to a cross. And how are we transformed? By hearing a list of do's and don'ts? I think not. We are transformed by looking up to that Jesus. Let me show you what I mean. What was the first sin? The first sin that was ever committed. What happened? What was that the heart? What was that the soul? What was the battlefield of the first sin that ever happened? It was the devil convinced Adam and Eve that God was not trustworthy and God was not good. That He did not have their best interest in mind when He gave them a command. And they're like, no, I think we know better than God knows. He's not good, He's not trustworthy. But what does the gospel do? What does the gospel do? It removes every shred of doubt that He is trustworthy and He is good. That He is a God who would come from heaven to earth. And He would live the life that you could not live for you in your place. And then He would die the death that you deserve for you in your place. And He would nail every act of stubbornness that you've ever committed or ever will commit to a cross for you, to forgive you, to redeem you, to heal you. And we should look at that gospel, and in our desires and our way of thinking, our minds and our hearts should change to say, man, there's no doubt in my mind that I can trust this God. There's no doubt in my mind that this is a good and a loving and a kind God. That He would do that for me. Steals Satan's ability even to tempt from us. Transforms our desires. When we look at what Paul calls the truth of Jesus, the gospel. If you don't get anything else, you need to check out, go to sleep now, because it's lunchtime. That's fine. You get that. You get that. You aren't transformed by do's and don'ts. You're transformed by the gospel. You're transformed by looking to Jesus. That's the supernatural part. That's the part that matters. That's the very heart and soul of what Paul's saying here this morning. That's our hope. But guess what? We have a part two. The second thing Paul says, application number 2, put off the old self and put on the new self. What's he saying here? He said, if you're a believer in Jesus, you actually have a choice. Listen, every morning when you wake up, you have a choice. Not am I going to do bad things or not do good, not do bad things or do good things. Yeah, well, that's true. But that's not the heart. We've already said that. The choice is, am I going to set my mind on the gospel? Am I going to set my mind on the God who loves me? Am I going to set my mind, as Paul says in Colossians and Galatians, on the Spirit, on the new creation that I am in Jesus? Or am I going to choose to walk in that old person and be stubborn in my sin? Listen, if you're a Christian here this morning, you have a choice. You have a choice. You have that choice 1,000 times every single day. And all is saying, now that Jesus has done the work for you, all I'm saying is like a garment, just take that old self off, put it down, and walk according to the gospel. Walk according to the Spirit. Not only that, though. Number 4, he says, be renewed in the spirit of your mind. How can Paul command us to do something that happens to us? It's a passive idea. We don't renew our own minds. We don't have the ability to do that simply in our own power. We don't. So what's Paul saying here? I think he's building a progression here. He says, you look to Jesus, and you're transformed. You trust God. And, hey, the taste of that sin just doesn't look the same, right? Like when God changes me, I look at the gospel and I say, man, the real goodness of God has exposed for me the fake goodness that I was finding in my sin. When that happens, God does something, listen, experientially, something in here. Some of you have experienced this before. Some of you came even this morning into church and your heart was cold. Your heart was hard. Your heart was calloused. I've been there. I've gone to church 1,000 times. I've been going to church since before I was born, right? I've gone to church 1,000 times and my heart was not where it needed to be when I walked into the worship of God with His people. And Randy starts singing, He is faithful. He is glorious. He is Jesus. And all my hope is in Him. And there's something, listen, there's an experience that happens. It's like that callus just dissolves. It's just like it falls off. And your heart becomes soft. That's what Paul means by being renewed in the spirit of the mind. He's building on ideas. We look to the goodness of God in the Gospels. We take off the old self and put on the new self. What does God promise to do? He's making a promise to renew your spirit. And so here's the challenge, guys. Keep singing. Keep singing Him in His Word. Keep praying. That's the hard one, right? Let's get super, super real for this. This morning I wake up, okay? I go sit down and I'm like, all right, I'm going to start my day with prayer. And like 10 seconds in, I'm like, this is boring. Okay, am I the only person who's going to be real this morning who did that? This is boring. I don't want to pray. But have you had the experience of pushing through? And 5 minutes later, well, you really don't feel that much different. 10 minutes later, push through and you're like, God, just keep praying. Keep seeking the face of God. Something happens. I don't know when. I can't time it. It's like 12 minutes and 22 seconds. I don't know. I can't time it exactly. Something happened. I hope you experience this. If you haven't, I hope you go home this afternoon and experience it. You push through it, you push through it, you push through it, you push through, and to the point where something changes in your heart. To the point where you go from, I don't want to do this is boring, to I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave the presence of God. Can I just stay here? I have responsibilities I need to get to. I got a job I got to get to. I got kids I need to get to. But I prefer to just stay here and pray and seek the Lord. What has happened there? He has renewed you in the spirit of your mind. That's our hope, folks. That's our hope. And finally, number 4. Paul says, jump down to verse 24. He describes, he says, put on the new self. He says, that new self is created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. Let me ask you a question. Who is the only being in all of creation or uncreation or whatever, all in heaven and earth, who is holy? God. Yes. God's the only one. Who's the only being in all of creation or heaven or earth who is righteous in and of himself? God. Okay, so then if you have righteousness or you have holiness, whose righteousness and holiness is it? It's God's. So what's Paul saying here? He's saying recognize that God's own righteousness and holiness is the stuff out of which your new nature is made. It's not your righteousness. It's not your holiness. It's His. And why do I even bother to point that out? Because this is the anchor of our hope. Your hope this afternoon and break free from the stubbornness of your sin is not in your righteousness and holiness. It never has been and it never will be. It's in the promise. It's in the promise that God has taken through the power of the Holy Spirit. God has taken His own righteousness and His own holiness, and He has put that inside of you. And He's made you into a new creation. The old things have gone and the new has come. That's your hope. That's the base for your hope to break free from stubbornness to sin. And Paul's saying, hey, just recognize what's true. This is not even a do application point. Again, it's in the mind, it's in the heart. Just recognize what's already true. If you have faith in Jesus Christ, if you believe the gospel, you've been created anew. The stuff out of which that newness is made is God Himself. God's character is what's renewed you, is what's made you who you are now. So is there hope for the people who are stuck in sin? Yeah. Is there hope for people who are stubborn in sin? Yeah, there absolutely is. And folks, some of you need to hear that this morning, and not just for you. You need to hear it for a sibling. You need to hear it for a child. You need to hear it for a neighbor. You need to hear that this morning for a coworker. There is hope. I was sitting between these last 2 services, talking to a lady here. And she said, what do you do? What do you do when the situation feels hopeless like this? I said, in my experience in youth ministry and just ministry of the church in general, it has often been the very ones that I was like, oh man, they got it. They're going to be good. They're walking with Jesus all well, that sometimes fall away. And boy, isn't it wonderful? The last one you would have thought in the room. The one who was so hard, who was so callous, who was so stubborn, who was so stuck. And man, God came in and did a miracle in their hearts. Yes, there's hope. Yes, there's hope. Why don't we bow our heads together this morning as we close? I want to talk to you 2 different kinds of people. One is the person, like we've already talked about, who came to this place this morning and man, you got that callous on your soul. Do you feel it this morning? God is distant, not sure if He's good, don't know that He's trustworthy. You know, if you're really honest with yourself, you say, I am darkened to the truth. I want to challenge you to do something right now. Right now. Not 5 minutes from now, not this afternoon, not later this week. Right now. In your heart, in your mind, I want you to run to Jesus. He already knows the truth. Bring it to Him. Say, God, I'm struggling right now. My heart is hard. My soul, it doesn't feel alive. It feels dead inside. I need you to come and I need you to save me. I need you to come dissolve this callous. And folks, I'm not just talking to people who don't know or believe in Jesus this morning. I'm talking to all of us. All of us go to that place sometimes on a regular basis. Just go to Jesus right now. Don't wait. Right now. Seek His face. God, I want you to fix this. God, I want you to heal me. God, I want this callousness to drop, to be dissolved from my heart. And I want to experience what it means to be renewed. Or maybe you're here this morning, you're like, man, no, but I'm with you. I get this. I'm excited. My heart is soft to the Lord. But maybe you know somebody. Maybe you got a family member. You got a friend. You got a neighbor. And they're stuck in the stubbornness of their sin. I want to challenge you to do the same thing. I want you to, don't wait 5 minutes, don't wait this afternoon. I want you to go to Jesus right now. Go to Jesus right now and bring that before Him. Plead with Him. Say, God, you know this. You carry this burden for me. God, you do the work. You give me the words to say. You change his heart or her heart. God, I come and bring it to you right now. Please, please do a work in their life. So we're going to stand and we're going to sing I Surrender All Again. And let this be that act of committal, that act of worship, that renewal of your mind. So you sing these words not just with our mouth, but with our heart.